On today's World Insight with Tian Wei, Angela Merkel makes her 12th state visit to China. Can China-Germany trade persevere despite external pressure? And we get up close and personal with the Philadelphia Orchestra. How has their music bridged the gap between China and the U.S.?
In times of turbulence, both sides are always looking for something they can agree on, and this seems to be one of them.
Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight, coming to you live on CGTN from Beijing. We start in the capital city of China, where German Chancellor Angela Merkel is paying a state visit to China from Friday to Saturday. Her entourage includes a large business delegation. So what's going to be the significance for both countries, this specific visit at a time of dramatic change worldwide? Take a look.
It's Merkel's 12th official trip to China. Chinese President Xi Jinping held talks with Merkel, saying the world's peace and stability is being threatened by unilateralism and protectionism, and no country can stay aloof. He said both countries should work together to face common challenges. For her part, Merkel said that Germany would like to engage with China in the spirit of multilateralism and free trade. Germany confirms that China is the country's largest source of imports from January to June, followed by the Netherlands and the United States. But China is its third largest export market after the U.S. and France. China says trade with Germany developed steadily as bilateral trade and two-way investments both saw growth. In the first 7 months of this year, Germany made nearly $1.2 billion of new investments to China, up by over 62.7%. China's investment to Germany, just over $1 billion, went up nearly 30% in the same period. China says there is big potential for cooperation in the digital economy, industrial networks, electric cars, artificial intelligence, environmental protection, and third-party markets. China says it expects a big German presence at the upcoming major trade fair in Shanghai this November. Experts say that many EU countries, including Germany, are facing trade pressure from the U.S., which could lead to an economic downturn. Because of this, Merkel's latest China trip is vital in fostering new business opportunities, bringing new momentum to the country's economy.
For more on German Chancellor Angela Merkel's visit to China, joining us in our Beijing studio, we have Daniel Guo, long way from Brussels, Director of the Center for European Policy Studies. Good to see you here, Daniel, in Beijing.
It's a pleasure to be here, finally.
Good to see you. Liu Baocheng, Professor and also the Dean of the Center for International Business Ethics from University of International Business and Economics. Professor, good to see you once again. Last but certainly not least, Jörg Wittke, President of the European Union Chamber of Commerce in China. Jörg, good to see you after so many years. So, all of these big stars appear in the studio. Obviously, it means there is a big thing that's going on right now in Beijing, Angela Merkel's state visit to China. Now, Mr. Guo, how much do you think this will be able to bring the two countries closer at a time of very complex change?
I think it's not so much the visit itself, because Germany has had a very consistent policy towards China for the last 20 years. It's more to find ways how the two could actually collaborate, concrete terms, on trade and other issues, how to limit the trade war. And I think that is what they two should discuss together, and also find other areas where there's a common interest. And that could be, for example, climate change. And therefore, they have a lot to talk about, but the key would be concrete action now.
Concrete action, I think, already happening between the two countries for really quite some time. If you look at just one example, automobiles coming from Germany. Automobiles drive China and Germany trade ties, some say, with German manufacturers in China selling a whopping 5.1 million automobiles in the year 2018 alone, while a majority of German branded vehicles were produced in China. Just 290,000 passenger cars were actually exported from Germany to China last year. Another 150,000 cars were shipped from Germany auto plants in the U.S. to China. Interesting picture there, isn't it, Mr. Whitaker? It seems U.S. is being mentioned, at least in this part. Let's talk about that. So what does that backdrop, China-U.S. trade conflict, if not war, mean for China and Germany bilaterally and probably even on a more multilateral basis?
Well, if you look at the trade war, everyone talks about China and the U.S. As a matter of fact, there is quite some hassling and problematic gesturing between Europe and Germany and the U.S. as well. We have the President of the United States labeling the before-mentioned cars as a security risk, which is interesting because the biggest exporter from the U.S., as we have just seen, in cars to China are German brands. So we're all in there together, China and Germany being hammered by the Trump administration. And of course, we're all in a situation where we all lose money, many of us, that used to be better put up there. So in short, I guess we have to find something in common in order to at least balance this kind of loss in global business that we experience.
Can you, what is that thing in common, as you say?
Well, for example, it's opening up the market access to improve that. I mean, there's a long list of things that Angela Merkel is going to raise today on market access, and same as that China has the ability of selling its Huawei equipment, for example, into Germany. So there's things basically in a way that says, let's keep the status quo plus a little bit better. That's already a major achievement.
Oh, that's the nature you see, is it? Let's keep the status quo plus a little bit more. Is that also the nature you see it, Professor Liu, when the maneuvering space of China and Germany working together?
Well, I think Germany is now put in a more subtle and delicate position by what is going on between China and the United States. You know, Donald Trump is really fighting with everyone. It seems that it creates an opportunity for China and Germany to get closer. But many of those demands levied by Donald Trump on China are still shared by Germany, like market access, IP protection, and equal level playing fields among foreign businesses versus domestic ones. And then also the Belt and Road issue. Belt and Road is a strong proposition from China, and definitely from the Chinese perspective, Germany plays a very important role. But there is still a high level of suspicion and ill understanding of the true intention and strategic consequence.
So what you're suggesting, Professor?
What I'm suggesting is that, okay, let's let's have reassurance of what we already have, both on a conceptual level and on a practical level. And in the meantime, to defend a multilateral trading system and fight against protectionism. And then, let's find more ways to work together to shun the unilateralism.
Oh, all right. You already got two concepts going on there. Mr. Gorowa, let me just repeat that. One is saying status quo, maybe a little bit more. And this is saying, Professor Liu is saying, let's do it conceptually, let's also do it pragmatically. Maybe they don't cross one another, but, why not? Mr. Gorowa, what is the nature now of this ever-evolving world mean for this nature of relationship?
I think it has to play on two levels. There's the German-China level, where the status quo plus a little bit improved would be very good. And then, if you talk about Belt and Road, for example, there the situation for Merkel is a little delicate, because many in Brussels have the impression Belt and Road is meant to divide Europe. And that Merkel cannot do. So she wants to have...
That's the perception.
That's the perception. I'm not saying it is. It's perception, right? We all know that at the end, the road of Belt and Road finishes in Germany in a certain sense. So it's made for Germany, not by Germany, but for Germany. But the key question is, and I think here the Chinese side could reassure Merkel, that they will not use Belt and Road to try to divide the European Union. And that, I think, would be a key issue on which Merkel will have to insist.
I'm sure a lot of discussions are going on behind the closed doors when the two leaders and the state leaders are meeting with one another. But let's just go through some of the specific points that we already know about. One is about Chinese Premier Li Keqiang asked the German side to lift the export control. That has always, Professor Liu, a point China raised, even though our German colleagues suggest that even that is being so-called lifted and loosened, it would not be that much money that we are talking about here. So, Professor Liu, why is China so key on this? How much do you think that being done to a certain extent, let's just say from the German counterpart, would that mean for creating goodwill and probably good results?
I think one is that it can be a mean to tackle the trade imbalance issue, that because China has been enjoying what is defined as trade surplus.
I see facial expression already on your face to say, oh, really, is that going to be that much? Go ahead.
You know, give us a chance to buy more from you. Okay. And also buy something very expensive. That's one thing. The other is, okay, China is aiming at, playing a larger share in the emerging industries that is lying ahead, and definitely Germany has an upper hand, particularly now we benchmark the Made in China 2025 with 4.0 industrial in Germany.
Yes.
And we can be a very good student. So,
meanwhile, there seems to be some kinds of decoupling technology-wise between China and the United States.
That's right, and particularly now at the at the critical moment when the United States is being so hawkish and even hostile against China, simply doing fair trade in technological licensing, and also even in having more Chinese scholars and students to participate in high-tech researchers. So this is something that is more compelling for us to go more to European countries.
Compelling, why not, Mr. Guo? York, you'll wait a little bit later.
Actually, Merkel will have great difficulties with the export controls, especially on military goods.
Why is that?
Because of domestic political opinion. She has a government which doesn't have a very solid majority, because she depends, of course, on a second coalition partner. And they are very strong on this. Right. The Greens are becoming stronger and stronger in Germany, not yet in parliament, but in opinion polls and everywhere. And they would not like to see export controls to be loosened. It's not something which Merkel can just say, I agree. It has to be agreed by the entire German parliament.
Exactly. It's going to be very, just look at how you show it. It's going to be very difficult. The facial expression Daniel's face earlier. Another thing, multilateral. Okay, so now China, Germany, of course, holds high the multilateral system, because many believe it really benefits the two sides in real terms. And therefore, you have a Washington that seems to prefer to withdraw from the international system, saying me first all the time. Will that be an opportunity for real for the two sides to cooperate? I mean, China and Germany. Not just potential, but for real.
Yes, let me briefly hijack your show to answer maybe the thing about the export control.
Okay, 30 seconds to hijack.
We talk about military equipment primarily, or something which is closely related to military equipment. And that could be in the range, I don't know, 5 to 10 billion a year. Now, Europe and China trade €1 billion a day. So it doesn't really swing the needle. I think it's more an issue of phase, because it's going back to 89. Coming back to the multilateral, of course, I mean, the two largest exporters in the world want to basically safeguard the mechanism that actually let them build this up. And the largest...
It's also kind of trust, isn't it, from the Chinese side at least to see it.
Well, China benefited hugely from 2001 onward from WTO. Germany benefited always, and the US is now actively dismantling it as the largest importer in the world. Of course, we have a common interest. Now, the two countries have to find a place to meet together, and that was just recently something which was cancelled, so it's really high time. We need in business primarily something where we can see there is a tangible result.
Aspiration is one thing, it seems that you're suggesting, but pragmatic implementation of possible cooperation, that's another thing. We hope one equals to another, but it's not necessarily always the case. So, Mr. Guo, with what kind of spirit that the two countries have to be able to have in order to guarantee there will be something as both see some opportunities.
There's an opportunity soon to go beyond the spirit, because very soon an arbitration body at the WTO
That's right.
will lose its last judge, basically, and it will no longer be able to function.
The appellate body, which
Exactly.
is the so-called the teeth of WTO, as they say.
And there's an occasion for China, Europe, not Germany alone, Europe and other countries in the world to form a coalition of the willing and say, we do something without the US. But that we do something would mean that these countries would say, we create perhaps a new body, a new rule, and we ourselves agree that if somebody has a ruling against me, I will accept it.
Of course, those are two things that needs to be in the principle, right? Of course, that also means wide consensus among all the parties that they would agree upon all these principles when those things are being established. But are you talking about aspiration, or are you talking about possibility for implementation? As you just said, it's going to be very soon.
It could be done in 2 months, but there the question is, do we go beyond the talk of multilateral system and rules-based, and somebody comes with a proposal, and somebody has to take the initiative and says, okay, this is my proposal. Do you sign up or not?
Now you look at, Professor Liu, we've been in this room talking about China-U.S. trade discussions for many times. If you look at the timeline, October is a timeline for re-engagement, quote-unquote, through negotiation at least, and then December likely to be another timeline when the tariffs from the Chinese side, which have been suspended for a long time, likely to go down if things are not likely to getting better. So if you look at the timeline, what Daniel is saying right now, is it workable? Is there a possibility?
I think there is, because both of these countries, and particularly China, have benefited a great deal, to play on a rule-based multilateral platform, and WTO earned the respect simply because it has a appellate body to settle disputes. And China sometimes wins, sometimes loses, but we really abide by it. But now, when it's getting paralyzed with the U.S., the obstruction, it is high time, because we have over $200 billion of trade. So there's definitely going to be disputes. So we have to find a way to mediate and arbitrate these issues. Otherwise, when disputes are not really solved, and they can easily go and provoke the hostility against each other. So
and the ill feelings, for sure.
Yeah, this is something that we have to go for it, particularly now when we do not have a very strong political trust now.
Things are not rosy, as all of you gentlemen know very well, particularly these days. But let me just say, the economy, the economic growth rate, both Germany and China has been going down, even though people could argue it is on a global basis that we're talking about. But Germany and China are some of the economic pillars of the world. So how do you see that trend? How will that, if we think about it in the short term, likely to have an impact about the so-called priorities that the two economies are likely to do with one another? Mr. Groh, this is really your home turf about the economy.
The economy actually looks weaker than it is, perhaps. I think part of the slowdown in trade will be temporary, because it's really only US-China. And Europe, China is wide open, right?
When you look at the US growth rate, the GDP also down to only 2% recently.
Okay, there's always cycles, right? And German growth rate is, everybody says, 1.5 trend. 1 year it's 1, next year it's 2, then 1, right? Not a big deal. The key question is whether China then continues 6, 5, 4, 3.
I'm not sure whether it's 4 or 3.
Or whether
we are economists, we don't play that game.
So what I'm saying is this slowdown should concentrate the mind of the politicians. If you want to do something concrete to help trade, here it is.
Yes, there is enough momentum, at least, when it comes to the trend of the economy to do something about it. Finally, before we go, we have only less than a minute and a half left. Mr. Whitaker, China and Germany is not just about trade. There are many other things that the two countries agreed upon with one another. Climate change, many others. how much will those be able to provide more momentum about cooperation? Short term.
Well, first of all, I guess the economic downturn is cyclical. Everyone was living off cheap money, and now we're ending the period that was. I guess now it's really for us to open up our markets. We need an investment agreement. It's very interesting to see that China and Europe agreed to finish this end of 2020, exactly when Germany has the presidency of the European Union. So Merkel personally will still be in office and drive for this. We just need tangible results to tell business, markets, despite all these negative news media, there are some markets that open up even more.
And what about the other two gentlemen? Some thoughts, briefly. Mr. Guo.
Climate change is the ideal area where the two can collaborate. We both have good technologies. I think we can open the market. But it's really something where leaders can only sit down and say, okay, let's have the same line globally, and otherwise everything is okay.
Yeah. Professor Liu, final
I
word.
think from China's side, we can really use China and German cooperation as a good showcase to show that how China can really further open its door, for example, not only in the manufacturer side, but on the financial side.
I see.
And then, we can really show to the world that by collaborating together and by deepening our cooperation, we can do far more to help these two economies.
Liu Baocheng, Daniel Guo, and Jörg Wittke. What a pleasure, gentlemen, to have you, the three of you, in the studio for your insights. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And you're watching World Insight, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm Tian Wei. Still to come on the program.